Spotlight Series. I'm your host, Scott Nerney. It's Monday night. We're live from the Queeset Inn. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and pass this on for whatever social media that you have. This is very important information. Sometimes we do a little entertainment. Sometimes we do news. This is a bit of both because people need to pay attention to what Samantha has to talk to us about with elder care planning. Welcome to the Spotlight Series.
Thank you.
You're from the attorney of McCarthy Law.
I am, yes.
And your last name is?
McCarthy.
There you go. Give us a little background on yourself before we get into the specifics.
Sure. So I'm an attorney. I focused most of my career in estate planning and elder law, but the reason I do this work is because I grew up in a home where we took care of my grandfather, who was a quadriplegic from multiple sclerosis. And so I saw the family side of the need and didn't realize until I went to law school that there was actually something I could do that involved the practice of law that would connect kind of the things that we had needed as a family with the community resources.
And at McCarthy Law, is it only estate planning or do you do a lot of other things as well?
Sure. We do estate planning, elder law, and then we do probate, guardianships for adults, and residential real estate, and that's it.
Okay. So I want to talk about probate a little bit later because
Sure.
That's a big thing that people don't really understand that much.
Yeah, it's confusing.
It's kind of the last ditch place that stuff goes.
Yeah.
But tell us what, you mentioned your grandfather and this is what brought you there.
Mm-hmm.
What have you been hearing from the community about what you do?
I think there's just a lot of fear in the community related to estate planning and elder law. People hear probate, but they don't know what that means, right? Or people hear, my neighbor lost their house, Medicaid took their house, or the state took their house. And so a lot of people are just worried, but don't have any of the information available to know how the laws and the rules are going to apply to them. And so it's scary. As you age, as you think about protecting your family, those are important things. And it's very difficult to get all the resources. You go on Google and you get 10 different answers to the same question. So it's hard to know where to even turn or what even applies to you.
So let's break the two pieces for people to understand. The first one is elder law.
Yeah.
So explain what your focus is there.
So elder law is really the focus of, as people age, how do we make sure their assets are protected? How do we avoid probate and make sure their things will go to the people that they want? But while they're alive, how do we make sure we can leverage those assets to help pay for care if necessary, or protect those assets and get them the care they need? So we do a lot of Medicaid planning, for instance. If someone needs long-term care, one thing that people frequently don't understand is that there are options at the last minute if you need long-term care. So if someone needs to go to a nursing home and they have assets, you don't have to pay the $13,000 to $15,000 a month out of pocket. There are asset protection strategies that if you have a community spouse, we can save you 100% of your available assets. If you don't have a spouse, but you have adult children you trust, we can still save you half of those assets. So that's a lot of what elder law involves. And then it also involves elder care to make sure people have the right resources in the home as they age before they get to that point of needing to transition to a care community.
And when you run into these situations, when you're kind of on the border of knowing something's going to happen,
Yeah.
You have a lot of partnerships, I assume, with people who can say, well, I need a nursing home. It's not just always, sometimes it may be a situation where the closest place is the other end of the state.
Yeah.
You have partnerships with people where you can help bridge that a little bit, I assume.
We do, yeah, and we actually have a new program called Elder Care Coordination through our life care planning area of our practice that involves having a geriatric care social worker on staff. And so her job is exactly that. Like if someone's at home but they're aging and need some resources, how do we find the right community partners, get those things set up to support people aging safely in place? If someone needs a transition to an assisted living or a nursing home, how do we figure out what facility, what's available, how do we get the bed we need, how do we pay for it? Because it's important that people stay close to their family if they have family around so that people can continue to visit if there is a transition needed to a care community.
So it's a little different than I need a surgery, I go to a doctor, he sends me to a specialist, I go to a hospital, everybody does everything for me.
Mm-hmm.
I have no decisions. In this situation, I have nobody to help me, and I don't know any of the decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So having a staff person like that is huge.
Yeah, because a lot of times people don't even know what questions to ask. Like they know there's something they need to do, but they're not sure what it is. And, you said people don't have someone to make the decisions. We hope that people have a healthcare and a financial power of attorney in place so that if the need arises, someone can help them, right? And we can help them put those documents in place as well. But I really am a huge advocate for allowing people as they age to be active participants in the decisions. So sometimes if there's a diagnosis that's cognitive, you may not be able to do everything yourself, but I want people to be active participants in what's happening with their life as long as they possibly can. So to know where to even start in navigating like the long-term care and aging maze is so hard to figure out.
And let's break a little bit into estate planning.
Sure.
So in the past, I've heard many stories over the years. Oh, it's for, rich people, Elon Musk and Warren Buffett and
Yeah.
all the rich people. I don't have an estate, so or I shouldn't have to care where things go at the end.
Sure. I mean, some people don't care, right? And that's okay. We all get to make decisions, but a lot of people have people they care about or organizations they care about. So whether you have children and you want to make sure they're protected, or if you care about charities or, other people in your family, other friends, estate planning is really a way that we make sure that while someone's alive, they have what they need. So if you were to become incapacitated, who can make your decisions, who can pay your bills, who can talk to the doctors and make care decisions for you. And then there's the plan that happens if you pass away, right? So we talk about probate. Probate is often what happens if you don't have an estate plan. If you have no beneficiaries or don't have joint owners, don't have a trust, then your assets will go through probate. And so a very common misconception about estate planning is, how do you get through probate? Is a will sufficient? Most people think that if you have a will, you're all set. And there's nothing wrong with a will-based estate plan, but all a will is doing is telling the probate court what you want to happen. So you still have to go through the process, which in Rhode Island is a minimum of 6 months. It can be very expensive. You have to pay attorney's fees and filing fees and inventory fees. And so it's something that a lot of people who care about their families want to avoid. I joke with clients sometimes that, if you don't like your kids, send them through probate, right?
Yeah,
And
sure.
some people make that choice. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just time consuming, expensive, and kind of stressful. So estate planning helps us to say, what do you own? Who do you care about? How do we plan for them? Because there's also the piece of, maybe you have minor children. So I have 4 kids at home. They're all minors. So if something were to happen to me, how do I make sure that the stuff I have goes to them, but probably not outright? My oldest is 15. I don't want him inheriting anything in his own name, right? So I need to have protection in place. Or, I met with a client earlier today whose son has a drug problem, and then another client who has a special needs child. And so how do we protect things for them? That's all part of estate planning.
And I know when my mom had passed, she had everything in a trust, like similar to what you would do.
Yeah.
And I looked at it and said, well, if this had to go through probate and I'm going to expect to wait 6 months, there was a house. And, with people out there thinking, well, it's not a big deal. It's, it's a house. I'm going to sell it.
Yeah.
You're not going to sell it for a while. You still have the electricity, the water, the grass cutting. You're not there all the time. Maybe you need to install an alarm. I was looking at, for the average house, it's $1,000 a month to run the house.
Yeah, you look at all that, and then taxes,
it's your money,
insurance,
it's
and
not
fees.
the
Right, because you don't
past.
have access to the person's money yet. So you're so right. I mean, that outside of the court proceedings, is expensive and time-consuming and stressful. And oftentimes, if you're going through probate and there is real estate, you have to ask the court for approval to sell it. You have to get approval of the purchase and sales with the offer price. And so it takes a lot longer. And in the meantime, you're draining assets that, especially if you don't have assets available to pay those costs for someone else's property, it's difficult.
Not to mention the horribleness of the ad in the real estate paper that says estate sale.
Yeah.
People just discount it automatically.
Yeah, and it's because people know it's going to take time, right? The real estate market is something that's always changing. So to try to figure out how do you sell a property, now at least it's a seller's market, so maybe you can get someone, but people see that and they automatically know it's not going to be a quick close. There's going to be a process involved, and a lot of people just don't want to deal with the court proceeding. And on top of that, if you're mourning the death of your loved one, of your family member, to have to go through all of that additional stress is just a lot.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I think the easiest way to explain things is to tell people what they think they know, and you can set the record straight in many cases.
Sure.
Well, let's try anyway.
Okay.
I'm going to call it Mythbusters.
Okay.
So my health insurance will pay for all my care in the future.
That's a really common one. So people have Medicare, they have supplemental policies. Those will pay for your hospital stay. They might pay for rehab, and I say might because you have to have a certain number of overnights where you were actually admitted to a hospital before it'll pay for rehab. But rehab is no guarantee of any portion of time. So a lot of people here, for instance, Medicare will pay for 100 days in a nursing home for rehab. You're entitled to up to 100 days, 20 days in full, the rest of the days at a copay, but you're not guaranteed any of those. I have clients who've only gotten 2-3 days or 2 or 3 weeks. So that's all that Medicare is going to cover. After that, if you can't go home, there's nothing to cover the costs of long-term care from a private health insurance standpoint unless you have long-term care insurance.
And it's important to know long-term care insurance, when properly done by someone
Mm-hmm.
like yourself, working with the right people, it's in a facility or at home.
Yeah. So long-term care insurance is something that gets a bad rep. A lot of people don't like it. There are older traditional policies that are like your health insurance, you use it or you lose it, which are very expensive. But if you have one of those policies, hold on to it. But the great thing about long-term care insurance is it really buys you options. So we don't sell insurance, but we work with partners in the community who do. And I always tell clients, if it's something that could potentially be something that you could afford, you should look at it. Even as a rider to a life insurance policy, for instance, which makes it a little bit less expensive, but then you are buying the opportunity to have someone come into your home to help pay for that care, or assisted living level care, which there's no mandated Medicaid for assisted living. And so it really is a way to guarantee that there's some funds to help bridge the gap of care in a setting that really feels right. Because a lot of people don't want to go to a nursing home if they don't have to.
And you kind of covered Medicare will protect me, but talk a little bit about if the assets aren't protected in any way, and even if some of the Medicare bills are covered,
Mm-hmm.
there's always co-pays, and
Yeah.
as our older generation will talk about, as the donut hole and
Yeah.
other things that are happening, a stroke or some other bad situation
Mm-hmm.
can really mount up hundreds of thousands of dollars of medical bills, which
Yeah.
are now due with those
Mm-hmm.
assets that are out there uncovered.
Yeah. So medical bills are tough, right? Those are something that someone owes individually. And so it's confusing because medical debt collectors will try to come after spouses. But as a spouse, you're not technically required to pay your other spouse's bills, you know? And if you need long-term care, you got all of the hospitalization copays, like you just mentioned, plus the $15,000 a month, or, you know, sometimes it's a little bit less than that. But 10 is probably the absolute floor that we see in Rhode Island for monthly cost of care. So anything you haven't protected, and when I say haven't protected, I mean you haven't planned at least 5 years in advance, that 5-year look back people talk about. If you haven't planned 5 years in advance to preserve those assets, they're available to pay for your care, you know, unless they're an exempt asset like your primary residence only while you're alive, which can get a lien when you pass away, which gets confusing, or things like retirement accounts. So those assets now are considered available to pay for care. You have to spend them down before you can get Medicaid to pay for care. And that's kind of where we come in the elder last sphere, is how do we say, okay, you have these assets, maybe your spouse needs long-term care, I can save you those assets and get them the care they need. So you're not draining them at $10,000 to $15,000 a month. So you're not paying hundreds of thousands of dollars for those copays.
And you mentioned the kids, so not your kids at 15 and down, but
Yeah.
one of the big myths out there is, I'll just let my kids deal with it.
Yeah, so I joked earlier, but if you don't like your kids, that might be an okay option. But, most adult children, they're living their own lives with their own families and their own jobs and trying to help their parents. And, if they don't know what their parents would have even wanted, it's a very difficult position to be in. Never mind to try to navigate, finances and what assets are there and where are they and how are they held and what are the beneficiaries if they have no roadmap. So sure, you could leave your children to deal with it, but it is a mess. It's so much easier if, while you're able to, you start getting organized, kind of have these conversations with your children, talk about what you would want. And your kids probably don't want to have the conversation either, right? Nobody wants to think about mom and dad passing. It's not maybe a conversation you want to have like at Easter, for instance, but start talking about it over time in little bits and pieces, start documenting things in little bits and pieces. I always say get a folder and keep all your important documents, or a binder with your estate plan. Just make sure your kids know where it is. That way if something happens, there's at least a starting point, because that is one of the most difficult things for adult children to try to figure out.
And we talk about passing away, not everybody makes it to 107. People, if you look at the obituaries, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old.
Yeah.
So, because you can't tell when the time is. One of the last myths I hear a lot is, oh, it's too late to do anything.
Yeah.
Too late could be at 55, could be at 75 or 80. Or it could just be, well, last month you thought that, but you've had another month to think about it. So talk to what you see in your practice is not too late to work on it.
Yeah, it's really never too late, and it's also never too early. Estate planning is anybody age, let's say 18, who needs powers of attorney when you go to college so your parents can still be involved, all the way through the day before you pass away. We have plenty of clients who call us who are in the hospital and not sure if they're going to make it, and it's still not too late. We can help make sure assets are titled appropriately. Maybe we're not going to do a trust at that point, but can we add someone to a deed real quick before you pass, get that recorded so we protect that? Can we make sure your beneficiaries are shored up? You stay out of probate by making sure you have joint owners or beneficiaries on every asset you have. So those kinds of things, never too late. And in terms of long-term care, like we talked about, there are emergency options. So if you need care this month or next month, we can still preserve at least half of your assets, sometimes all of them, and get you the care that you need. So there's just really, it's never too late. And if you wait and you wait, you'll probably have spent a lot of money that you didn't need to spend. And ultimately, none of us know when that time is going to come. You know, unfortunately, nobody has a crystal ball, and people do pass away young, and some people live till they're 107. And I'll tell you, most of my clients who live past 100 don't necessarily want to. But, you know, take the time to make a plan and then review that plan every couple of years. It's something that you definitely need to at least yourself look at and say, has anything changed? Have any of my family members changed? Have any of my wishes changed? And then just review it over time.
And talk about a program that your office does, specifically life care planning.
Yeah. So life care planning is, you know, the geriatric care social worker that I mentioned, but the whole purpose for her is to bridge this gap that we found that there's nothing available in the community to say, okay, I want to age safely in place. I need to transition, but I don't even know where to start. How do I navigate the long-term care maze? That is her job. Her name is Kirsten. She has decades of experience in geriatric care social work, and the purpose is to help our clients figure out what resources they need. So we want to be able to say, okay, what does mom and dad need? It's often the adult children that come to us. How do we help them get the care they need? How do we help them arrange rides? How do we figure out what services are available? What, you know, places could they go to? Where do they like? What things do they enjoy that we can help? There's just not really a lot of resources to say, what can we do to all collectively come together to support this person? I always want people to age safely in place if they can. I want them to have the autonomy to make their own decisions, and then we help navigate that with them as things change. So she'll meet with people at least quarterly in their home, does a care assessment. You know, are they safe? Do we need to get someone like a community partner to come into the home to make modifications to the home to make it more safe? And so it's just all of those things that sometimes you don't know what you don't know, or you don't know what questions to ask. She knows what questions to ask. She knows what things to be looking for to help people navigate that.
Great. And we've talked a lot. I want to ensure people that, you know, as young as you look, and it's you know, an old profession of, you know, trying to take care of our elders. How long have you been doing this?
So I've been doing this for 10 years, and prior to this I worked in banking, and so I saw the things on the other end that didn't go well. But my practice as my law firm has been around for almost 6 years. In 2 weeks it'll be 6 years. Prior to that I worked at another firm, and then also worked in the financial industry with trusts as an attorney to see what went wrong when people didn't do estate planning right. So, you know, my experience has been mostly dedicated to this area, and I look young, but it's the Botox. It's not.
That and keeping good care of people that you see every day.
Yeah, it's very rewarding. You know, we're not the attorneys who are in court fighting all the time. We get to really make a rewarding and meaningful difference in people's lives. It's awesome.
And tell us a little how people can get more information. Sure.
So people can reach out to us at our office at 401-541-5540. You can also visit our website. It's www.mccarthylawri.com. If you check out our Facebook page as well, we have a lot of helpful information and tips there that people can get some free education and information that answers a lot of frequently asked questions.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm sure.